Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Essential NFL Podcast. I'm your host Stephen Clinton, and on this episode, I am just running through the 32 NFL teams post free agency and looking at what team outlooks and also draft needs look like at this current juncture. So. This episode, I'm doing teams 9 through 16. I'm just going in order, in reverse order of finish, so original picks rather than working with the trades. Although that doesn't apply to these 8 teams. But it does mean that we are kicking things off by talking about the Chicago Bears, who have the 9th overall pick in addition to the 1st overall pick, and definitely a situation now that Chicago's officially moved on from Justin Fields. Presumptive number 1 pick is going to be Caleb Williams, and whatever some detractors out there may say, I think this is about as good a landing spot as you can remember for somebody who's being picked with the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. I mean, Chicago is locked and loaded on offense here. And that was even before the Keenan Allen trade and bringing in DeAndre Swift and Gerald Everett in free agency at tight end. So you look at this team, I mean, DJ Moore is a legitimate number 1 wide receiver. I mean, guy who can, get open and do damage at all 3 levels of the field. Ultra explosive, difficult to bring down with the ball in his hands. I mean, Moore, sets such a high standard as the number 1. And now you bring in Keenan Allen, who's just, such a savvy route runner, so good underneath, and is going to be just, ultra reliable for this rookie quarterback, assuming that's Caleb Williams. And then, to top it off, Ryan Poles brings in Gerald Everett to be a move tight end, which, meshes really well with what they already have in Cole Kmet. With Kmet being more of a inline tight end who can, block, catch, do a lot of things. Cole Kmet's a really good player for them. And, I think the Everett compliment is going to give new offensive coordinator Shane Waldron, who has a history with Everett in Seattle. Believe that overlap is correct. I might have that wrong with those two bouncing back and forth between the Rams and the Seahawks, but they're definitely out of that same branch. So that gives them a lot of options. And the one role that you might say that they need to fill at receiver is stretch receiver, and Tyler Scott definitely has some juice, so he could end up filling that role in this second year here. And then along the offensive line, I mean, I don't know that you'd say you have an elite player right now, but I think Darnell Wright, the right tackle, could absolutely become that in year 2. Just needs to add some polish and pass protection. I mean, he's a massive man who moves very easily for as big as he is. And, he's already a force in the run game, so could definitely see him take the next step in year 2. And they're solid at the rest of those offensive line spots. It's just a matter of do you have any really true difference makers who are going to be the reason that the offense moves, rather than just not standing out as a reason that they don't move. So, and you might imagine with all those positives that you flip it over, and the Bears are have holes on defense, but it's the opposite. I mean, it's really hard to point to like a true hole that they have on the defense after they, whatever you think of signing Kevin Byard in free agency, that definitely slots, fills that hole at safety. So, the Bears, they could, no defense is going to turn down an impact player, but this unit is already in pretty good shape. I mean, Montez Sweat, Tremaine Edmonds, and Jalen Johnson are all, impact players and being paid accordingly. And then you also throw in names like Gervon Dexter and, Kyler Gordon and Tyreek Stevenson as ascending players who could all be impact players as well. And this Chicago defense is going to be in great shape either way. So, this pick at number 9, they could take it in a number of different directions here, but honestly, I would like to see them just really take the offense to the next level and add another really highly touted prospect to this group and just try to uncork it. Could make for a really interesting NFC North if this plays out. But, whether that is getting Rome Odunze in the draft or, going with one of these offensive linemen who's available, probably one of the guys who would have the ability to kick into guard. I think that if you go from, just being good enough on the offensive line, which, yeah, you can definitely play offense that way, but, having multiple impact guys along that line, it makes a difference. So, that would be another fun way to go. So, for the mock draft, I threw in, names like, Talise Fuaga out of Oregon State and Troy Fatanu out of Washington are two names among several tackle prospects that I've heard, as options to kick into guard. So I think that's, probably an option if that's the way they want to go. But, either way, Chicago, everything is trending towards them being, definitely a factor in the 2024 season. So, it's all going to come down to, whether Caleb Williams can hit the ground running as a rookie quarterback, of course. But, if he does, this roster has every chance to, be competitive in a division where it's going to be tough. I mean, because Detroit and Green Bay are both rolling, but very possible that we see Chicago wind up being a factor in the NFC North during the upcoming season. So it'll be fun to see exactly how they line that up. At number 10 is the New York Jets. So, New York's roster even more dependent on, some aging veterans with injury histories. But at the same time, I don't think there's another team in the NFL that did a better job of addressing their needs in free agency. Jets, pretty clear they needed to get upgrades on the O-line. They go out, get Tyron Smith from the Dallas Cowboys, who played at a very high level and played the most games that he's played in some years last season for Dallas. They also acquire Morgan Moses in a trade with the Baltimore Ravens. And, Moses is not, an elite player, not certainly, and probably not even a plus player, but, I would say that he's still a solid starter when he's been out there. Was playing through a pectoral injury for the Ravens last year, but again, played at, a reasonably solid level. And then they also signed John Simpson, who had his best season playing as a guard for the Ravens last year after, he was, at one point in his career, not a good player playing for the Raiders in my assessments, but, has definitely taken his game to a different level over the past few years and is a solid contributor moving forward. So adding those three players, really changes the outlook for the Jets on the offensive line, which is, of course, a position they needed to add to with all the injuries and, busted draft picks and everything else that's happened along the way for this team. And, with that all done, I think that there is some talk that, maybe they use this 10th overall pick on a weapon. And I think it's definitely an interesting consideration. It'd be, a lot of fun if one of these receivers were to drop. If Brock Bowers, the tight end from Georgia, were to drop, he could be a really interesting fit in this offense here. But at the same time, I think that you still have to really think about adding another offensive lineman. Garrett Wilson, we've seen Aaron Rodgers, funnel the vast majority of his targets to one player in the past. Garrett Wilson could definitely be that guy, fill the role that Devontae Adams filled in Green Bay a few years back. And, Breece Hall is an unbelievably explosive player at running back. And, you got to hope that the Jets are able to get more out of Allen Lazard in year 2 of this contract. He's making, a 6-digit contract here at about $13 million a year. And he was just a total non-factor with Aaron Rodgers out of the lineup last year. So you would hope that you're going to get more out of him. And then you've got the roll of the dice on Mike Williams coming off the knee injury here. So with all of those pieces in place and your quarterback being 40 years old and coming off an Achilles injury, I would rather, go try to add an elite young prospect on the offensive line who's got some positional versatility because, it's not as if Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses are the only guys with injury issues on this offensive line. Elijah Vera Tucker, the former first-round pick, he's been very good when he's been healthy, but man, he just tore his Achilles. He's had several significant injuries at this point, and, obviously you hope the best for him, but who knows if he's going to come back at the same level off this injury on top of everything else. So, I think that while they have, improved the situation here. I think going into the season with, you've got Max Mitchell as your swing tackle and Wes Schweitzer as your interior O-line depth as it currently stands. And, that's fine to get you through a game. But, if they have somebody in the current starting lineup go down for an extended period, I don't think any Jets fans want to see Aaron Rodgers playing behind a backup lineman. So I think it would still, work well for the Jets to target one of these offensive linemen. So, as I said, Brock Bowers, one of the 3 receivers, also makes sense. Probably don't need to add anything to the defense at this point, but, if you look at any of those options, whether it's Talisi Fuaga, Troy Fatanu, or, in the Jets case, you could also look at, the J.C. Lathams, Ola Fashanus, and who knows, whatever guy they like best, but I would definitely lean towards the O-line. And, if that guy doesn't end up playing a huge role, which I think, whatever. Yeah, I'd rather be know that the season's not going to go up in flames because a guy that odds are, Tyron Smith or Morgan Moses or Elijah Vera Tucker is going to get hurt again. So I would just rather be insured against that. And, can also use some of those mid-round picks at wide receiver, and definitely a way to add some talent in today's NFL. So moving forward, we got the Minnesota Vikings, the Denver Broncos, and the Las Vegas Raiders. And let's just talk about all three of these teams together, because all three of these teams, big need is the quarterback. And I think that these are the three teams that they're prospects for not only the 2024 season, but the next 2 to 3 years hinge more on this draft than any other team we're really going to talk about in these 32 teams. We've got the three teams at the top. They can just pick a quarterback, but these three teams are, competing to move up to take, the fourth quarterback. If you're in the camp that believes JJ McCarthy is rounding out this crop of prospects. And, if they miss out on that guy, all three of these teams are in a position to win now and compete now. And they are going to be short on options if they do not move up to get that fourth quarterback, whether that's J.J. McCarthy or whether it's Drake May or Jaden Daniels who winds up dropping. So focusing in on each one of these teams quickly, Minnesota has moved up to have the 23rd overall pick in addition to the 11th overall pick. And, to me, it just doesn't make any sense to make that move unless they are going to be very aggressive and going to get a quarterback. I don't know why you would prioritize going up to get that 23rd overall pick this early unless it's part of a larger plan, right? So they definitely have the best chance to move up. And I mean, you talk about a great landing spot for a rookie quarterback. I mean, throwing to Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and then having, Josh Oliver as just a weapon as a blocking tight end. Now they got Aaron Jones at running back. I mean, it's a really nice landing spot in Minnesota. And yeah, they do have, questions to address at the left guard spot, but there's, a possibility they bring back Dalton Reisner on another cheap veteran contract. And, they could probably get better at guard with, with Ed Ingram at the right guard spot, but at the same time, he's going to be their guy going into the season, and you're good at tackle. I think that Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill are one of the better tackle tandems you've got in the NFL right now. So, another very good landing spot for a quarterback. And, I do think that the Vikings have the best backup quarterback option, but, I've spoken some on the show about, Sam Darnold and the progression I think he's shown on film and late in his time with Carolina, and then, a little bit last year for San Francisco. But at the same time, that's, a very dicey prospect moving forward. So totally understand going up to get a rookie quarterback to compete here as well. And I think the Vikings are definitely the most, likely team to do that. But that said, Denver did not, they tried to compete with Russell Wilson, and while that didn't work, I think that there's a really good chance that Sean Payton's going to look to just keep competing here. And, the Broncos, I don't think they've got the talent level that the Vikings have on their roster. I'd really only point to Pat Surtain as being like a truly elite impact player. Cortland Sutton definitely coming off his best season in several years, but I don't think that he really tilts the field the way that he did back before he tore his ACL. Early in his career, the dude was an absolute monster. But at the same time, Denver has a lot of really solid players across this roster, and they're ready to at least compete right now. So I think that going up to get a quarterback, it's going to be, more difficult because they don't have that extra draft capital that Minnesota is working with here. But I think that, it's a move that the Broncos can definitely make. And, one thing, as I was going through this exercise, I was thinking that Denver was, maybe in a little worse circumstances than they are, given their cap outlook. Ultimately, they got to get the quarterback situation figured out, right? That's just rule one of the NFL, I think. And but at the same time, like if they do get that quarterback situation figured out, even though they've got just a lot of solid players right now, they'll start having minus whatever they would trade for the quarterback, they'll start having their full complements of draft picks moving forward again. And it's not like they've got tons and tons of money tied up in this team. If you look at 2025, 2026, they've got a lot of flexibility to go in a different direction with certain players. I think that if the Broncos do go to quarterback this year, it'll be, looking to compete rather than, really push, the Kansas City dynasty at the top of the AFC West right away. But if they get the right quarterback, then they can definitely, they'll have all that surplus cap room to really reimagine the team, and it could definitely work out very well in over the next several years here. And then the Raiders, we'll see. I love adding Christian Wilkins to the defensive line with Max Crosby. Should be a lot of fun to watch, and that unit, finished the season very strong. But we'll see what's going to happen with the offense here. Right now, Antonio Pierce is the head coach. Of course, he's going to say that Aiden O'Connell has earned the right to compete for the starting job with bringing Gardner Minshew as a very expensive backup at, 2 years for $25 million. And then, Luke Getsy, who, had his struggles as Chicago's offensive coordinator, I think it's fair to say, is coming in to navigate this group. And, we'll see. Luke Getsy, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say that, working with quarterbacks that are more his preference, he didn't seem to, much care for using Justin Fields' legs, at least, did not do that out of the gate in either 2022 or 2023, just kind of did it when push came to shove. So maybe working with just, a pocket quarterback like what he studied, his team using in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers all those years works out better for him. One thing Luke Getsy definitely knows how to do is how to deploy Devontae Adams as a number one wide receiver, because he was in Green Bay with Adams. So, that might be part of the reason that he got this job as well. But at the same time, some of the things that Adams was doing with Aaron Rodgers are not replicable with Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew at quarterback. So, we'll see. I think that, obviously you've got to say these are your guys right now, but, going into the season with these two quarterbacks would strike me as pretty similar to Atlanta going into the season with Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke as the quarterbacks. I mean, maybe, the Raiders are, a touch above that. But at the same time, Gardner Minshew's not bringing Shane Steichen with him as his offensive coordinator. So, I'm not sure, how big the gap between him and Taylor Heineke, if you look at the, full body of work over their careers, really is. So, we'll see. But, it's an interesting situation for the Raiders because, it's not like they're walking around saying the expectations are that we're going to, gradually build this thing. It's, we've got the Pistons rules against Jordan or whatever it is for playing against Mahomes, and we're ready to beat them now. So, I don't know. This organization has, a lot of dysfunction going around. It feels like, just year to year, just, it feels so crazy sometimes. And, I guess I just worry that, if you don't get an upgraded quarterback here and you're, thumping your chest going into the season with these two quarterbacks and you get off to a 2-6 start, which I think is definitely possible if Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew are your quarterbacks. Obviously, we haven't seen the schedule release yet, but, it's definitely a possibility with those two. I just can foresee some circumstances where that becomes problematic and, just a difficult situation to deal with if the team is struggling and you've got players like Devontae Adams and Max Crosby who are in their primes and looking to win. So we'll see how it works out for the Raiders. But, again, pulling the trigger and going and getting a guy at quarterback could, for these three teams, completely change the dynamic for the upcoming season. One team that is already having things change for the worse in terms of dynamics for the upcoming season is the New Orleans Saints. And this is a little bit of news that seems to have gone somewhat under the radar, I think, probably because of his position and all the draft news going on. But apparently Ryan Ramczyk, who, first injured, had a season-ending knee injury back in 2021 and has struggled with it since, was not the player he once was in 2023. And to be clear, I think that Ryan Ramczyk, if you're looking at the late, stage, 2017 to 2020 when he was on his rookie deal, I think he was in the discussion as one of the top 3 right tackles in the game, and certainly merited at least some consideration as the best player at that position. Lane Johnson probably held the title throughout that period, but just speaking of the fact that Ramczyk was a damn good player for this team. And, he has not been the same player since injuring the knee in 2023, that he was definitely struggling with it. But there was some hope that he was, going to get right this offseason. And instead it looks like, he might miss the entire upcoming season. And the Saints are really relying on Ryan Ramczyk to be out there. They don't have room for more issues with the cap. And if they were to have Ryan Ramczyk released as a dead cap hit right now, it would be a dead cap number of $35 million. That number is $24 million a year from now for the 2025 season. And doesn't sound like, there's anything good about Ryan Ramczyk's long-term outlook here for the Saints. So, this is just like, what I mean, it's just one more issue on top of the many issues facing the Saints from, the roster building standpoint in terms of their contract structures and everything that goes along with that. But yeah, this is a really difficult situation because offensive tackle was already a need for the New Orleans Saints going into this draft, assuming that Ramczyk was going to be back. Now you don't have a viable option at either left or right tackle. You might be in a situation where you're putting Trevor Penning back in the lineup, which, I wouldn't think that Derek Carr would be all that excited about that, given that, after missing his rookie season, largely due to injury, and then having just a really rough game against the Panthers to wrap up the season. Penning, came out and was the starter to kick off 23, and he promptly played himself out of the lineup, and it's a big project there in terms of what Penning needs to work on. I mean, he's constantly overbalanced, he's over aggressive. I mean, there is a lot in his game that would need to get cleaned up for him to be a viable NFL tackle. And, if that doesn't happen, I'm not really sure how the Saints are going to fix this, because there's not another option on the free agent market. The Tyron Smiths of the world are off in New York right now. So it's flipped from where it looked like the New York Jets and the Tennessee Titans were going to be the teams that really needed to address offensive tackle, like full stop. That's the decision in the NFL draft going into free agency. The Jets have kind of flipped that. They don't necessarily need to do that, and the Saints have joined that list of teams where they really need to add an offensive tackle. I think the 14th overall pick is guaranteed to be a tackle at this point, and given how the Saints have run things, seems batshit crazy to me, but maybe they will package first and second round pick from next year, first rounder and a third rounder from next year to move up into the 20 to 40 range in this draft so that they can get a second offensive tackle. Because they also have need to add some juice to the front seven on their defense. They've got other needs, and they have picks at 14 and 45, but they don't have another pick in the first 4 rounds of this draft. So it's a situation where it is just getting rough in New Orleans, and unless you think that it was some sort of bad luck that prevented last year's team from winning the NFC South, then I don't really see why you think that this team is going to be any better this year, and frankly the year after that, with the way all of this is structured. So I feel for Saints fans. Most talented team in the league from 2017 to 2020, as far as I was concerned. And, it's a shame they didn't get a Super Bowl in that run, but they have got to pull the plug on all this at some point, or it's going to be, 2026 or 2027 before they're really competing. So moving on to a couple teams we can address just pretty quickly here to wrap up. Indianapolis Colts, Colts GM Chris Ballard just sticks to his MO with keeping his in-house free agents, Grover Stewart, Zaire Franklin, and then Kenny Moore all back on the defense on solid contracts, and then bring back Michael Pittman Jr. at wide receiver on a multi-year extension. And I think that the one question I've heard voiced for some Colts fans is well, how do we get better if we're just bringing these guys back? And well, Anthony Richardson staying on the field, right? And I obviously with Richardson's injury issues last year, and the fact that his season was cut short. I mean, I think it was, I don't know if we were even into October when that happened, but if we were, it was pretty early October, and, it was just so disappointing. But, let's not forget that Anthony Richardson was absolutely electric when he was on the field, and if he's back out there in the 2024 season, he is going to, give Indianapolis a significant boost. So fingers crossed for Anthony Richardson's health, and hopefully that allows the Colts to elevate this thing next year. I think that they are a team that, outside cornerback to me is a pretty clear need for them. I thought that, watching back there, that week 18 game against the Houston Texans, the way Nico Collins, I mean, they just didn't really have anybody who could hang with him on the outside. And, of course, Collins is an ascending superstar as an outside receiver, but, hey, that's what you got to cover in the NFL, right? So I think that, the Colts, have long history of getting some Division two guys, or lower division guys with traits. Obviously Toledo in the MAC is not a Division two school, but lower level of ball. And then the Colts have always had a big connection with kind of that Mount Union coaching tree, and Nick Sirianni, who was on the Colts staff at one point as a Mount Union guy. Toledo head coach Jason Candle, he's part of that Mount Union tree. So I think that Quinyon Mitchell, the cornerback from Toledo, who's just absolutely crushed it through the draft process, makes a ton of sense for the Indianapolis Colts. So we'll see. But in terms of prospect to team matches, that one seems like maybe the cleanest match that I've looked at in the top half of the teams in the league. And then to wrap things up for this show, we got the Seattle Seahawks, who look like defensive tackle Byron Murphy was the most popular pairing with the Seattle Seahawks in early mock drafts, but now they've got Leonard Williams back and also brought in Jonathan Hankins as a veteran presence at defensive tackle. So, you combine that with the fact that, the Seahawks, cycled out their inside linebackers. Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks move on, but then they signed Terrell Bernard from Buffalo, and then also Jerome Baker from Miami, and do a similar thing at safety where they cycle out Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams, but then immediately sign Kayvon Wallace and then Rayshawn Jenkins to replace them. So, Seattle really doesn't have any glaring needs going into this draft. They've got, maybe a couple of position groups, notably wide receiver, where they've got, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, where that probably precludes them using a first-round pick at wide receiver. But besides that, I think the Seahawks could use their 16th overall pick at any spot on the roster. I think Seattle's in a spot where they're very solid, but I don't see how they're going to close the gap between them and the Niners and them and the Rams, barring a setback for either one of those teams. I think that the talent gap between the offenses, just with the whole San Francisco system, and then obviously Brock Purdy and the way he continues to develop, and then the Rams with Matthew Stafford and the way that offense gets humming. I think that Seattle's just kind of a step behind with Geno Smith, and I don't think he's going to be quite the quarterback to bridge that gap in that division. So the question is how do you chart a way forward? And granted, if Seattle could put together an elite defense to pair with the offense they've had over the past couple of years, I think that that's a much more viable possibility. And of course, Mike McDonald, as a defensive mind, might be looking to do just that. But obviously the status quo is not going to work in Seattle. That's why Pete Carroll is no longer the head coach there. So it's going to be interesting to see if they as they try to chart a way forward to move up the ranks of the contenders here. Is it by upgrading the defense? Is it adding an offensive lineman? Or they've got a need at they're turning over the left guard in the center spot, or is it saying we need to target a quarterback and try to get an upgrade on Geno Smith moving forward? And obviously brought in Sam Howell via trade, a possibility that he continues to develop a little bit, though I would have Smith ahead of him by a good margin at this point. Or do you go draft a Michael Penix? Do you draft a Bo Nix? And is that guy really a viable upgrade on Geno Smith? So interesting questions for the Seahawks. And it'll be fun to see how, John Snyder, who, not his first go around as the GM, but how he and his new head coach, Mike McDonald, kick things off. So that's it for teams 9 through 16. Thanks for checking out the Essential NFL podcast. And I'll be back to talk teams 17 to 24 in the next couple days here.